All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for the Classic Restaurants of Boston. The story of Boston is a link to food, hence its nickname, Beantown. Given the city's geography, its cuisine is understandably tied to the sea, with popular dishes such as lobster, oysters, and clam chowder. These are still served today at classic restaurants like Union Oyster House, Parker's Restaurant, and Legal Seafoods. There are also neighborhood favorites, such as Cantina Italiana in the North End and Sullivan's in Southie. In addition to Boston proper, the surrounding areas have their own specialties, including fried clams, the world's best roast beef sandwich, and bar pizza. From famous spots like Cheers to new classics like Anna's Taqueria and the Summer Shack, we're going to join local author Zach Lamothe as he explores the best food in Beantown. So hailing from Connecticut, Zach grew up in a house built in 1752, and from an early age was always intrigued by local lore and history. Zach studied New England history and folklore while a student at Boston University, attaining a degree in American Studies. He then earned a master's degree in special education at Southern Connecticut State University and has taught high school special education and history. So God bless you, Zach. The author of 2 books, Zach is also the editor of backyardroadtrips.com, which features family-friendly places to go throughout New England with an emphasis on nature, craft beer, and history. And again, I want to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library and the 9 partnering libraries for making tonight's event possible. So all 120 of us, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Zach for joining us here tonight. And Zach, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Robert. And thanks to Robert and the Tewksbury Library, as well as the other partner libraries for having me here this evening. So I'm very excited to be here. And first of all, I'm going to share with you mostly tonight all about my newest book, which is Classic Restaurants of Boston. But before we begin with that, I do want to give you just a little bit of background about myself, as well as the writing that I've been doing now for about 10 years professionally. And so not just about myself, but also the writing process and kind of what has led me to where we are today. So I am from Connecticut. I have 2 books that are released about Connecticut. One is called Connecticut Lore, and one is, I'm not sure if you can see that there. Let's put me over there so you can see the picture. So the first book is Connecticut Lore. This was out in 2013. And then the sequel was more Connecticut Lore in 2016. And these were not only ghost stories, but they also served as travel guides to places slightly off the beaten path. These titles, along with the book, my third book, The History Lover's Guide to the South Shore, my website, Backyard Road Trips, and this current book, Classic Restaurants of Boston, all reinforce the same idea. It's basically meaningful travel on the local level, is what I call it. Let me tell you how I got there. So something major happened to me between the release of my first 2 books. Becoming a father for the first time in 2015 completely rocked my world. And I'm not talking about just you helped create another human being, jaw-dropping moment. I'm talking about how it altered my travel-centric lifestyle. I was a traveler. I've always been a traveler. Family vacations, weekend trips, afternoon excursions, it didn't really matter. I was kind of like a dog. I just wanted to go, not worrying much about the destination, but enjoying the journey itself. When I found myself elbow deep in diapers and pureed carrots, I knew my life was changing, and changing fast. As a good friend of mine commented, just a few months ago, it was dinner in Italy for you, and now it looks like your Friday nights watching the VHS copy of Dumb and Dumber. No, my lifelong bachelor friend was not referring to me as dumb or dumber because of the child, and maybe just a little bit, but that a fun activity was now watching such a film on a weekend night. It all came to a head when, during my son's 2nd month on this earth, I asked my wife which weekend we were going to the Deerfield area on a fall afternoon. Seeing that this drive was 2.5 hours each way, her eyes shot daggers deep into my soul. And what was lost in this altercation? The ability to travel. I was mortified. I figured at 2 months, my son had better be ready for a leaf peeping weekend. Clearly, I was more concerned with my needs than his or my wife's. After trudging through the first stage of grief, denial, and then lamenting the fact that there would be no more travel, I paused for a long introspection. What shall I do with my time? Maybe I'll start to enjoy Sudoku. Maybe I'll learn how to shingle a storage shed. Maybe I'll start cross stitching. Well, this is how Backyard Road Trips was born. My idea was that I didn't have to drive to Alaska to find adventure. There was plenty of exploration at a local nature preserve, where at an earlier time in my life, I could bang out a few of these types of trips in one day. Now each trip has become a destination in itself, but a destination I look forward to almost as much as going to a trip overseas. I learned to take time to enjoy what's in my own backyard, and I hope to share these ideas for your own backyard road trips, whether they're to different restaurants in Boston or if it's someplace on my website, like a nature preserve or a brewery or just a place to take a walk. This brought me to an idea of exploring literally what was right around me. The region where I live first was the South Shore. A history lover's guide to the South Shore lets me act as part historian and part travel guide. Each chapter of that title provides a synthesized history of a South Shore town, but then provides an actual visitable location in the said town. So here are my two latest books, as mentioning the History Lover's Guide to the South Shore right there. So the newest book, Classic Restaurants of Boston, actually both of these, I took what was difficult for me, the ability to travel to faraway places, and made it into something rewarding. Through all of the work, the same message is clear. There is the ability to travel meaningfully at the local level. Educating oneself on the culture of a place, the cuisine, a trip to a local museum, taking in natural beauty at a park, or digging up the past at a historical site. This is meaningful and something that can be done practically anywhere. So with that same theme, this is basically what I've been working on through all my titles, all my books. With the two Connecticut books, The History Lover's Guide to the South Shore, The Classic Restaurants of Boston, and currently the title that I'm working on right now is called Distilled in Boston, and it's a guidebook to all of the basically Eastern Massachusetts craft distilleries, as well as a bit of history of spirits in the Boston area. So going into classic restaurants. So hopefully everyone's eating dinner, because these next slides might be making some of you hungry. So here are some of the famous Boston cuisine that we'll be talking about in this title. Things like lobster and lobster rolls. There is the argument about what the correct way to have a lobster roll is, but we don't have to get into that. Oysters, roast beef sandwiches, Boston cream pie, scrod, Boston baked beans, cannoli, fried clams, bar pizza, and New England clam chowder, to name a few. And a major part of what defines a city is cuisine. A variety of foods are associated with the city of Boston and its surrounding areas. Throughout the history of the city, from its colonial roots to the current day, food has played a significant role in Boston. It itself is named for a prize legume, Beantown. As much as Boston's known for its distinct menu items, the greater Boston area from the North Shore to the South Shore also has its share of regional specialties, including the roast beef sandwich, the bar pizza, and the fried clam. Of course, with its coastal locale, seafood favorites such as New England clam chowder, or chowder, as locals say, lobster rolls and scrod are also on the menu. From the first Thanksgiving to the present day, food has followed closely with the history of the Boston region. The story of cuisine in the Boston area starts in 1620 with the arrival of the group known to history as the Pilgrims, just down the road in Plymouth. Classic Restaurants of Boston winds through the founding of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in Boston through its colonial and Revolutionary War era. It encompasses waves of immigration up to the 21st century. From Union Oyster House and Parker's Restaurant to Legal Seafoods and Regina Pizzeria, classic restaurants have become synonymous with the city of Boston. Known for a wide variety of food, from baked goods to burritos, from seafood to spaghetti, a visit to Boston would not be complete without stopping at these classic restaurants. So you can see some of the classic restaurants that are in here, including Union Oyster House and Parker's, and A lot of these I mentioned, but also Mr. Bartley's Burgers in Cambridge and Cabot's in Newton. So you can see it's not just Boston, but also the greater Boston area for many of these. And so the book is also organized by neighborhood. So the first part talks about the classic restaurants themselves, and then it's a neighborhood guide into different parts of the city and areas around the city, uh, which includes the classic foods and restaurant. So each section has its own intro describing its rich history and its own unique cuisine. And these include places such as the North End, Irish pubs that are not just in South Boston, but are scattered around the city, Chinatown, Little Armenia, which is in Watertown, historic taverns, hipster classics, dive bars and sports pubs, North Shore, Route 1, also known as Restaurant Row, the South Shore, and Metro West. So today for the presentation, we're going to take a virtual trip around Boston and its surrounding towns. So what we're going to do is give a bit of information about what you're going to find in many of these different neighborhoods, and towns, and also different themes, such as dive bars and sports pubs might not be synonymous with one specific neighborhood, but instead different places around the city. So first of all, we are going to the North End. So the North End is Boston's Italian neighborhood. Exploring this section of town is as if you step back in time or overseas to Italy. The main streets and small alleys of the North End have a truly authentic feel. Expect to overhear conversations of locals spoken in native tongue. Bocce, cappuccino, and of course Italian food are further elements of the North End. The two main streets, Hanover and Salem, are lined with Italian eateries, many that have graced the same storefronts for years. Restaurants such as L'Osteria, La Familia Giorgio, and Giacomo's have been here seemingly forever. L'Osteria, for example, is a small Italian restaurant that exemplifies the true North End. The exterior's brick facade and awnings tempt the passerby to come in for a meal with old world charm. Notice the intricacies of the building's architecture itself, including the upper floors, which house presumably apartments. It has such an authentic European feel. The interior's decor is simple but tastefully decorated. There's nothing flashy about it, but come sunset, it's a perfect backdrop for a date night. The name Osteria in Italian refers to a simple place to eat. It has been a favorite of mine since I was a child, between L'Osteria and Florence's restaurant, which was located on North Street, right next to the Paul Revere House. These were the two Italian eateries my family would go to after a day out in Boston. Still, my favorite meal on the menu after all these years is linguine with mussels. Try it either with a tomato sauce or with a garlic, oil, and white wine sauce. True to its acclaim, it's hard to get a bad meal in this neighborhood. Once more of a hidden gem, especially when obscured by the Route 93 Central Artery Expressway, North End restaurants are popular dinner time destinations for locals and tourists alike, meaning it's best to call ahead for reservations on the weekend. The North End is as close to mainland Europe as one can get in New England. During the summer, alfresco dining tables line the main thoroughfare, Hanover Street, as well as Salem and North Streets. In addition to the sights and sounds of Italy, smell is just as important, maybe even more so. Walking on roads such as Thatcher Street and Salem Street, garlic literally wafts through the air. If you weren't hungry before, just stroll a bit in the North End and you'll soon be. In addition to delicious Italian dishes, other North End mainstays include the ever-popular Cafe Vittoria for cappuccino and other hot drinks. It's been around since 1929. In the pastry wars of the North End, bakeries vie for the title of best cannoli, with strong but friendly competition among the likes of Mike's Pastry, Modern Pastry, and Bova's Bakery, which, just for doing some hard research, I did actually go to each of these and try a cannoli both just with ricotta and nothing else, as well as one from each with ricotta with the chocolate chips in it to see which was my favorite. In the summer, try to align
Wait a second, Zachary. You can't just leave it like that. Which one was your favorite?
Be like a little cliffhanger, no? All right. So I'll spoiler alert here, right? So I would say for the one with just the ricotta, with no chocolate chips, I would give the nod actually to Bova's. So it was my favorite. You can see that the The picture here has the largest is Mike's, the one in the middle is Modern, and the one to the right is Bova's. And with that, the Bova's doesn't come in a nice white box. It has just like a plastic container, so the picture wasn't quite as great with that one. That I believe I gave the nod to. With the chocolate chips, it was a little bit of a game changer, and I enjoyed probably all of them the most. Although I have to say, when eating, well, I guess it was actually 6 cannolis at this time, maybe 3, because I did split each of them. So it's a little bit less gluttonous to say 3 instead of 6 cannoli. But by the time with the Mikes, it's really big. So I think I kind of gave the nod to the other 2, but you honestly can't go wrong. But without the chips, Bova's with the chips, it's really a toss-up.
Gotcha. All right, I asked the hard-hitting questions, Zach.
Yes, you do. It's like, yeah, that's I know it's kind of a cop-out saying that but they are really all good. So again, and this is one thing that I'm sure, people have their opinion, and they, kind of live or die that opinion. So it's also can be a touchy subject. You don't want to talk religion, you don't want to talk politics, and you don't want to talk cannoli. So I think those are the 3 rules, right? So moving on from cannoli, hopefully didn't offend anyone just yet with my cannoli choice. We're going to Irish pubs. So now we can at least celebrate with a little bit of, with some cheersing of a Guinness. Is cheersing really a verb? I don't know. We just made one up. So Irish pubs. So if there's one ethnicity that comes to mind when speaking of Boston, it has to be the Irish. Portrayed in movies such as The Departed and Good Will Hunting, the Irish of Boston have been glorified on the silver screen and written about in books, such as the autobiography called All Souls by Michael Patrick MacDonald, and almost every Dennis Lehane novel. The Irish of Boston have made their way into the consciousness of mainstream America, and heck, even professional basketball team is the Celtics. Also, folks who have never set foot in Beantown have heard of Southie. As far as restaurants go, Irish pubs are not confined to only the predominantly Irish ethnic neighborhoods of South Boston and Dorchester. An Irish pub can be practically found in every section of town, from neighboring Brookline to the heart of downtown Boston. Past and present names such as the Blarney Stone, Purple Shamrock, and the Kinsale are all monikers that reference the country of origin. Along with pubs that feature stick-to-your-rib meals such as beef stew, shepherd's pie, and fish and chips, many of the following establishments are known for pouring Irish, which means Guinness. Unlike most beers which are simply dispensed via tap, pouring the perfect Guinness is an art form. The stout beer should be poured holding the glass at a 45-degree angle, following a settling process. After that, it gets topped off. A bartender in the know will only serve it this way. It's common to find the Irish pubs mentioned here staffed by immigrants from the Emerald Isle or from established Boston Irish families. Included here are stalwarts such as J.J. Foley's, the Black Rose, and Mr. Dooley's. Moving on in the city tour, we are going to take a stop at Chinatown. Of all of Boston's ethnic neighborhoods, among the most authentic is Chinatown. A true enclave that was once tucked away in the shadow of 2 major highways is now threatened by the ever-growing development, commercially and residentially, of downtown Boston. Chinatown is coping with change as a neighborhood, with its strong roots in the past, adapting to the modern world of the present without losing its identity. To keep Chinatown an enclave of traditionalism while being able to stay relevant. Chinatown's trying to avoid ultimate gentrification, which would leave the Asian imprint on this community as something of the past. The neighborhood is looking to keep its cultural roots within 21st century Boston. The official entrance to Chinatown is through this gate on Beach Street, one of the neighborhood's major streets. The gate was a present from Taiwan in 1982, along with the lion statuary located in the same plaza. These are the symbols of Boston's Chinatown. Through the gate is a bustling neighborhood where many of the restaurants and shops' signage are written in Chinese, and English is not the first language spoken. Major streets, including Essex, Beach, and Neeland, cross through Chinatown, but the heart of it lies within the smaller roads, just Tyler and Hudson Streets, which are lined with restaurants and shops. Classic Chinese eateries, including the oldest in the neighborhood, China Pearl, along with other venerable favorites, Peach Farm and Windsor Dim Sum Cafe, are all located on Tyler Street. These streets are not only rooted in the past, but newer restaurants such as the ever popular Shoujo are also located on Tyler Street. Although Chinatown was once delineated by the Mass Pike underpass and the monstrous Southeastern Expressway, Route 93's elevated highway, it is now seamlessly woven into the fabric of the larger city on the whole due to the demolition of the overhead expressway. Which has not changed is what to expect in Chinatown. And as far as this book goes, great food. Try a mooncake at Hing Shing Pastry at 67 Beach Street, or a fruitcake at the Eldo Cake House on Harrison Avenue. They are still great places to try dessert. Another Chinatown must-try is a dim sum experience. At some restaurants, the small dishes are wheeled around tableside by servers pushing a cart. This is the experience at China Pearl, which is explained further in the book. Try a sampling of the best in Chinese food with dumplings, steamed buns, and rolls as dim sum. Dim sum is a series of small dishes in a Cantonese specialty. Dim sum is traditionally eaten for lunch or breakfast. From Cantonese to Chinese barbecue, Vietnamese to Korean, the choices are endless in this area. One of the funkier places, reflecting modern Asian cuisine, is Double Chin, which is known for its cube toast, an outrageous hollowed out brioche served French toast style, a basis for an ice cream sundae of sorts with toppings that include cereal, ice cream, and Pocky, which are thin chocolate-covered biscuits. And if any of the neighborhoods in Boston that has really retained its cultural feel, I would say Chinatown is certainly one of the strongest along with the North End. But as downtown Boston is growing, it is certainly being threatened with the ever-expanding city. The next part is not really a neighborhood as much as it's just some of the old taverns that have been around since, some of them since Revolutionary days or just after. So Boston's known as the cradle of the Revolution. The history of the 18th century Boston is that of the events leading up to the American Revolution, with the likes of Boston luminaries such as Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, and Joseph Warren instrumental in the nation's plea for independence. Sites dedicated to their lives are essential in aspects of Boston's history. Many of the historic locations of colonial Boston and sites connected to the Revolutionary War are found along the Freedom Trail. I'm sure many of you have walked the Freedom Trail, the whole thing, or maybe parts of it. It's definitely one of the main historic attractions in the city. But along the route, or in close proximity to it, are places where the likes of Revere, Adams, and Warren held court. Not only were taverns neighborhood drinking establishments where the founding fathers were known to raise a pint or two, but many were also meeting spots, secret or not, for revolutionary activity. Two of the most historic that are still standing and in use are the Warren Tavern in Charlestown and the Bell in Hand on Union Street in Boston. Other famous taverns, including the Green Dragon, the Salutation Tavern, and a Bunch of Grapes Tavern, are faded memories of Boston's past that long ago fell victim to demolition. But doesn't the Green Dragon exist today? I could swear that the statue of the soldier has the Green Dragon words written on his head. What's that all about? Well, it does exist, kind of. The Green Dragon is located at 11 Marshall Street on the same block that houses Union Oyster House, and across from the Bell in Hand. Although the tavern plays on its history, the original was located close by on Union Street. The modern Green Dragon was actually founded in 1993. Which, all things considered, 1993 for a restaurant is still a pretty good run, although just not as much as 18th century. Now, you can see the picture of the Union Oyster House here. In Union Oyster House, to be honest with you, taking the book, there are full books written about Union Oyster House, and Union Oyster House really anchors this title as well. So they were very, very gracious to me, the folks at Union Oyster House, letting me use some fantastic images from their past, from the restaurant, the oldest in the city, continuously run from 1826. So really fantastic place too there that you can get all kinds of different cuisine that really represent the city of Boston, between oysters, hence the name, as well as chowder and many other baked beans, all kinds of things that are related to the city. So in the title, as I was saying, many of these, the real classic restaurants, such as Union Oyster House, such as Legal Seafood, such as Cheers, they have a full chapter dedicated to them. They're not just part of a neighborhood piece. I just wanted to share with you an example of one of these chapters here, and also one of Boston's most famous restaurants. And this is Parker's Restaurant, which is the restaurant of the Union Oyster, not Union Oyster House, I'm sorry, the Omni Parker House. Some kind of house has an O in a house. There you go, Omni Parker House Hotel. So Parker's Restaurant, also known as the Parker House Restaurant, from 1855. So this is located inside the iconic Omni Parker House at 60 School Street. It heralds itself as the oldest continuously run hotel in the country and is arguably the most famous restaurant in Boston. It's Parker's Restaurant. Actually, Parker's would be on the short list for most important restaurants in the whole country. Where else can 3 classic dishes be associated with the same restaurant? It is the ultimate classic Boston restaurant. The Parker House Hotel was built in 1854 and opened to the public a year later on October 8, 1855. For the chic hotel built by Harvey D. Parker, a fine dining eatery to accompany it was needed. The restaurant is adorned in oak and complemented by fine crystal chandeliers. With its high ceilings and white tablecloths, it has an air of importance. The restaurant is known for 3 different Boston associated dishes: Boston cream pie, Parker House rolls, and scrod. The Boston cream pie has been deemed the official dessert of Massachusetts. It's a yellow cake layered with custard and topped by a coating of chocolate icing. Created by French Parker House chef Enizen in the 19th century, this delectable treat has become closely associated with the city of Boston. Another Parker House creation is the Parker House roll. The restaurant staple has its roots from the 1870s. Legend says that a disgruntled worker baked unfinished rolls after an argument with a guest, thus giving the rolls its intended shape with crispy outside and a soft interior. And the next one is scrod. Scrod is not an actual fish. For high-end restaurants such as the Parker House, making sure the fish they serve is the freshest, this is the legend of the scrod. Not knowing exactly what type of fish would be at the top of the heap, literally, the Parker House would demand the top of the fisherman's daily catch from the wharves of Boston, since it was the freshest. The Parker House maitre d' used the word scrod, nevertheless, what kind of fish it was. It could be cod, halibut, pollock, although the tale of the word originating with the Parker House has been deemed the stuff of legend. And later in the chapter, so also goes to describe all the different people that have put their imprint on the Parker House. So we have John F. Kennedy, who proposed at the Parker House at the restaurant. And you also had famous employees such as Emeril Lagasse, you had Malcolm X, and Ho Chi Minh all working in the same restaurant. Not at the same time, but that's quite the crew there. And one disclaimer here, the picture here of the Boston cream pie, also in the chapter about Boston foods, talks about the Boston cream pie. And this slice of pie is actually from another famous bakery, Flour Bakery and Cafe. And it's really one of my favorite slices of Boston cream pie in the city. And what I like about it, as well as the one from the Parker House, is they're not that syrupy sweet filling that a lot of Boston cream items tend to have. So it's sturdy. It's almost like almost tastes more like, in my opinion, more like a tiramisu without the almost coffee-esque flavor to it. So it's quite excellent. So now we're going to travel a little bit out of town. Definitely taking a whirlwind trip around the city today. So as Boston's related to certain foods, such as chowder, Boston cream pie, and Boston baked beans, to name a few, so are the suburbs. Instead of a town having a specific cuisine, whole regions around Boston are known for different foods. From the North Shore to the South Shore, although close geographically to the city, each have dishes that are location specific. And I know that many of you are from the North Shore, so I'm definitely not going to mention one roast beef restaurant over another. I know everybody certainly has their favorite. For the sake of history, I did feature Kelly's, since it's the supposed originator of the roast beef sandwich. So you've got to give credit where credit is due there. But starting our journey, this region is known for 2 major food items: fried clams and roast beef sandwiches. Given the proximity to the ocean, the fried clams may seem like an obvious choice. But did you know that Woodman's in Essex, Massachusetts, claims to be the originator of the fried clam? Although still the most popular in the region, if not one of the most popular in the whole country, other contenders to the fried clam crown include J.T. Farnham's and the Clam Box. Roast beef may come as a surprise since beef is more synonymous with the cattle-heavy Midwest. The towns just north of Boston, including Revere, Lynn, and Beverly, are all known for their fast food specialty, the roast beef sandwich. It's served simply, thinly sliced, tender roast beef on a poppy seed bun or onion roll, punctuated by mayonnaise and barbecue sauce. The most well-known on the North Shore roast beef joints is Kelly's, with the original seaside location on Revere Beach. Also north of the city, not associated with a distinct menu item, but still food-centric, with a slew of classic restaurants, is Route 1. Route 1 corridor, from Saugus to Peabody, transports a driver back to the 1950s and 1960s. If any place abides by the adage, bigger is better, it is Route 1. The mantra is illustrated by Prince's Pizza, which includes a few stories tall leaning tower of Pisa perched atop the Italian eatery. In Kowloon, a humongous Polynesian-themed Chinese restaurant. My first trip on this iconic road happened in 2002. Remember, I am from Connecticut. Back then, there were more traces of the mid-20th century nostalgia than there are currently. As Boston's desirability has grown, these suburbs have been transformed into upper-class bedroom towns, with condos, chain stores, and restaurants have replaced much of the old Route 1. Some pieces of the past, such as the gigantic cactus that used to mark the location of the Hilltop Steakhouse, still stand. The huge cactus, as you can see there, now marks a residential and commercial plaza. I am happy they did keep the cactus though, but I feel like every time I do travel on Route 1, there are less and less of the old Route 1 there, like no more Fern's Motel and places such as that. So kind of definitely a bit of nostalgia there on Route 1. And we're going probably the fastest trip from the North Shore to the South Shore that anyone's ever taken, especially if anyone's tried to drive on Route 93 at any time. Doesn't even matter rush hour or not. But the final stop just out of the town for our tour here is the South Shore. This region is anchored by the historic community of Plymouth, the landing place of the Pilgrims, and the first established permanent English settlement in New England. The South Shore, of course, is known for its seafood. Seaside towns, including Plymouth, Quincy, and Marshfield, that house some of the best seafood shacks and restaurants in the state. But these areas also known for a certain type of pizza. South Shore bar pizza is truly different and utterly delicious. It's typically served in a personal pan size, and the cheese used is cheddar, not mozzarella. The crispiness of the pizza gives it a crunch, but the pizza is never burned. Although associated with the South Shore, much of the best pizza actually comes from the area just south of the city, with establishments such as Linwood Cafe in Randolph, Town Spa Pizza in Stoughton, and closer to the sea, the Black Raspberry Pub in Plymouth and Poopsie's in Pembroke are all regional favorites. So clearly, from the North Shore to the South Shore, classic Boston restaurants branch way out beyond city lines, creating classic Boston area restaurants. Now, with the book, again, I'm saying that it's separated into classic, the restaurant section has a little bit about the cuisine, and then it has also these neighborhood and themed tours. But there's a little bit more. So Backyard Road Trips, again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, is the website that I started. A couple, mostly me involved, a few other folks, but mostly me. And it gives ideas for trips, much of it around Massachusetts, much of it can also be other New England states. Again, just checking out different things that I recommend, such as nature preserves and breweries and restaurants and different driving routes. So all kinds of kind of neat things. And if you liked hearing me, Backyard Road Trips is also a podcast. There is Backyard Road Trips, the podcast, which is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Amazon and Apple. So anywhere you listen to podcasts, it should be there. It's also available via the website as well. So if anyone is interested in books, they are available at my publisher, which is the History Press, their website. They're also available Amazon. They should be in many stores, including Barnes and Nobles and a lot of local bookstores and libraries, as well as if anyone does want autographed copies, you can get them from my website as well. The restaurant book isn't on there quite yet, but it's going to be in there very shortly. And at this time, if there's any questions, I'd love to hear any questions or any comments that you might have for me.
All right, Zachary. So let's see here. Let's start with some comments.
Sure.
Victoria says Cafe Paradiso also has very good cannolis. Okay. Let's see. Sarah loves Guinness on tap. That is the best. Steve says that Peach Farm is excellent. Pat says Kelly's has the best clam chowder in her opinion. Jay says he was a big fan of Hilltop Steakhouse. Let's see here. Rosamond says, great program. Thank you. Patricia says, thanks, Zach. I'm now salivating. I think it's time for dessert. Elaine says, thank you for an interesting and informative evening. Sahil says, Hutbox has pretty good South Shore pizza. Excellent. So Yvette asks, how many restaurants are in the book? Do you have a total number?
Oh, let me do it. So basically, let's see, 1, 2, 3, just counting right here for a second. Okay, so there are 22 restaurants that are featured by themselves, which means they get a chapter dedicated to them. And such as the Parker House. The Parker House, that was a snippet of the chapter. It's much longer. For this presentation, I did mostly just kind of almost like a little appetizer of food, meaning showing what food was known for at a restaurant or a certain area without going too deep into it. And also left out a lot of the history that goes behind each restaurant. So 22 classic restaurants, but then in the sections such as the North End, the Irish pubs, Chinatown, there are many, many more that are featured. So we're probably talking upwards of, if I had to guess, 65 to 70 places that are total mentioned, with 22 featured completely. And then I actually included even 2 what I consider new classics, which the Public House in Craigie on Main, which have been, only in the last 15 years or so have been opened. So kind of a vague answer there, but hopefully
okay. That's okay. Deb says, thank you. Let's see here. Sarah says, thank you. Shinwei says, thank you. Joyce says, great walk down memory lane. How did you do your research of restaurants no longer operating since you couldn't visit them? Joyce is specifically thinking of Lockover or some of the ones on Route 1.
So unfortunately, there is all the restaurants at the time of publication were still in existence. So like Lockover is not. So there was my publisher is toying with the idea of creating a kind of a sequel, if you wish, if you call it that, but it would be kind of like past restaurants or historic restaurants of Boston, ones that are no longer with us, unfortunately. The Route 1 ones, I just mentioned the kind of idea of Route 1, but for the actual cuisine, I get more into Kowloon and the pizza with the leaning tower of Pisa pizza, places like that are still there. Although I do mention the Hilltop just in passing, but all the places there, it was actually really tough because I wrote this during the major part of the lockdown where just taking legal seafoods, for instance, and when I wrote the first draft of it, there was about 34 legal seafood outposts all over the country. Then before I submitted my final draft, it was down to 18. So I'm guessing a lot of it was COVID related. Maybe it was just other timing, but there were whole chapters I had to take out when I saw restaurants had closed, which was unfortunate. There was only one that I kept in there, and that was because it closed right when this was going to publication. And that was People's Republic in Cambridge under the hipster classic part that I ended up putting like an RIP basically and making only a paragraph instead of a full section about that. So, but that's why you're not going to see a lot of the ones that Durgan Park recently closed before this went to press. Even different things like doing Cheers. I had all about Cheers at Quincy Market, which closed in the middle of this. So it was definitely depressing to see, oh, there goes a full chapter, or there goes a second, a section. And of course, it was more depressing to see them actually close than to have to just hit delete. But yeah, so it's all restaurants that are open and hopefully still open right now.
Okay, so you've answered a couple of questions with that explanation alone. So that's good to clarify that up front there. So Mary asked specifically about the, I might be mispronouncing this, the Maliev, which I think is a restaurant that is closed. So you would not have covered that?
So Marliev, yes, I did do that. So at the time it was open.
Oh, okay.
So it's a place that had changed ownership. So basically it was under one ownership, and then it became, and then during COVID it was closed for a while. If it's closed right now, I mean, I haven't checked for a few months or maybe even a year now, so it could be closed right now. But as again, the time of publication, it was open.
Gotcha. Sandy notes that the Pillar House is also another classic that's long gone. Sarah says, thank you. Luann would love to see a book, sort of like what your publisher is talking about, where you cover historic Bostons that are historic restaurants of Boston. Sahil says, thank you. Diana says, terrific presentation and very informative. Joyce wants to know, what Cambridge restaurants did you include in the book, if any?
Yeah, so Cambridge, Mr. Bartley's Burgers is in there. I also included Cambridge. Let's see, Charlie's Kitchen is there. Well, Bukowski has actually closed the Cambridge branch when I was in the middle of it too, so that's only the one in downtown. I'm trying to think other Cambridge places, so definitely those. S&S Deli is also there. I'm just going to cheat and look at the table of contents here to make sure I'm not missing any. I think those, actually, so Craigie on Main is in Cambridge as well. And Jasper White Summer Shack has a branch there in Cambridge. And definitely the hipster classics have a few in Cambridge. So that's kind of Harvest as well is mentioned, has a chapter on Harvest.
So that was Joyce's question. Sarah has a follow-up question. What is your favorite Cambridge restaurant?
Ooh, I would probably say, based on just history alone, would be Mr. Bartley's Burgers. That was a place that I went to as a kid. My family and I would go for a day in Boston. Most of the quote unquote day in Boston would actually be a day in Cambridge, where back when Harvard Square was just a little more bohemian than it is today, it would be, hours of looking through record stores and bookstores and things like that. And at later years, we would go more to the North End for dinner, like an actual, tablecloth dinner with tablecloths. But Bartley's Burgers was often either a lunch or a late dinner. And I mean, it's such just like, you walk in there and it's timeless. I mean, the burger names change reflecting current political or, Boston area or sports figures, but it's still the same kind of, diner-esque food, I guess you'd say, that it's going to be just a lot to look at and a lot of fun. And I'd probably, go for that. I also do really, really like Charlie's Kitchen as a quick bite, always fun, good place to kind of just hang out. So those are some of my favorites, I would say.
Yeah. Teresa says, great presentation. Now I want cannolis. And Teresa asks, here's another sequel or future book suggestion. Yeah. How about a book about Boston area bakeries?
That would be an interesting one too. One of the bakeries, so actually an aspect of bakery, I guess, that I had a lot of fun with writing this one. It was the area called Little Armenia, which is in Watertown, which kind of a little under the radar. It's more in the Watertown area that basically abuts Cambridge, kind of actually near Midlands of Sofra, which is a fantastic bakery there. So not quite classic as the years have gone by, and not too many years have gone by just yet. But Sofra is just, one of really, really great, great bakery with some amazing sweets and some savory delights as well. But some of the bakeries there, like the Masses Bakery and Seven Stars and places like that, were really interesting getting into that, because a lot of these areas I was very, very familiar with. And I lived in Newton for a bunch of years and would go through Watertown, but didn't really stop and understand everything going on kind of behind the facades there. So that was a cool one. But bakeries in general would be a really cool, really great idea.
Very important question from Sarah. The most important question: is there a section in your book on donuts?
Ooh, you know what? I don't think there is a section by itself on donuts. There are certainly places that have donuts, but not, I mean, I'm thinking, now that we're talking about it, right? Kane's Donuts in Saugus, that could probably have fit the bill there. So yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint, but not a section by itself on donuts.
That's a missed opportunity right there.
I know. I did actually mention, it was funny, two of the things I proposed in my original outline to my publisher, one of them was mentioning Dunkin Donuts because it, did Howard Johnson, and they were like, no, we're going to stay away from the huge, mega. Like, so I said, okay. And then the other one was Fenway Frank. I was like, oh, Fenway Park or Fenway Frank. And they also said no to that one. So
gotcha.
Fun fact.
Elizabeth says there's an entire book entitled Boston's Lockover Cafe. It was published back in 1978, so it may be out of print, but some libraries may have it. Luann and Sandy both point out that Grendel's Den is still open. Luann also notes that Boston is a huge ice cream town, and so a section on ice cream might be appropriate in a future book. Sarah is ready for the sequel, so write that sequel, Zach. Absolutely. Teresa also wants a book on donuts and bakeries. She'd definitely buy that. Let's see, did I miss anyone? I don't think so. Oh, I did. I'm sorry. I guess maybe we should have started with this question, but it came in a little late. Patricia asks, what got you interested in restaurants? And I'll ask, why write this book? What was the motivation?
Sure. So first of all, I'll back up a little bit about the baked goods. So if anyone's interested in some of these kind of like, I wouldn't call donuts small because they're a big, important part of my own life as well. But some different themed ones. Like, so on my website, again, Backyard Road Trips, I have a lot of, my favorite blank of the area. And they can go from donuts. There's actually a recent donut article that I did write a couple months ago about like, it was, favorite donuts in the area, that kind of thing. And the area was pretty broad. I think I actually went down to Philadelphia for a couple of them. Which is quite a large area, but it was just some donuts I had basically in the last 6 months that, because it's my website, I kind of do what I want. I don't really have as many parameters. So with that one, I was able to just be like, you know what, this one in Philadelphia is awesome and I'm going to write about it. But this one in, Plymouth is also so great and I'm going to write about that. So if anyone is interested in any of that kind of stuff, there's plenty. If you go to Backyard Road Trips and you look at the index, there's enough stuff on there that can last you days. There's like 200 and something articles that are there and are getting updated, pretty much weekly. In between books, what do? I write stuff on the website. So that's kind of fit. I'm actually doing an ice cream one as we speak. So I've been going to a bunch of ice cream places. So, again, trying to do everything in the name of research. That's all, in the name of research. And Robert, I just kind of went on a tangent. So could you tell me those two questions again? I'm sorry.
No, what got you interested in restaurants and why did you write the book?
Okay, very good. So what got me into restaurants is I've always enjoyed going to restaurants. I wish I was a better cook myself, but I certainly can appreciate other folks' cooking skills. And I like food really from across the board. And I'm happy with a greasy spoon, and I'm happy with fine dining. And I think there is something worthwhile in all of those places in very different assets and aspects and kind of facets of life. And I think it's just as important to get like a really good hot dog versus an amazing filet mignon. And there's room for both of that. And I think the constant with it is it's got to be good. It's got to be like an excellent version of it to be worthwhile, to be worth, to be really that enjoyable. But there's room for both. So that got me in there. How this whole thing happened, and that's the kind of an interesting story too, is that I started off my writing career writing for actually the Wellesley Town Pages many years ago for a friend. I took my thesis in college, which was about folklore in New England, and really focused on Connecticut, where I'm from. Connecticut has a lot of weird stuff, so it really does. And took that and made it into the basis of my first book, Connecticut Lore. That led to a second book, also in that kind of genre. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed anymore as being just that weird guy writing about, folklore and travel, because my main love is really travel. And this idea is travel on the meaningful level. And I love history. I love stories behind the place. And I don't care if it's someone's legend or folk tale about a certain area, or if it's the story about how this bakery started making, their amazing bagels. I just love to learn about it. And at least with the bakery, you can taste the bagels. You can't really taste the folklore, the folk legend. So that led to eventually this kind of mixed up with the history part of things for the History Lover's Guide, going from folklore to that. And in that, I had put together for each chapter a restaurant that should be gone to at every single town on the South Shore. Basically, like kind of my own nod to which one that should be gone to. My publisher said, that doesn't really fit what you're trying to do here with the History Lover's Guide. But that got the idea of, okay, I can write about restaurants into this one. And so then they actually asked me to do this title, which is part of a national series. And at the same time, I also write for my own website, which talks a lot about food. And at the same time, since then, I write for Edible South Shore, South Coast, part of the national edible. There's Edible North Shore, Edible South Shore, etc. So I do write for Edible South Shore, also about food. So basically, one thing led to another that led me to write about food, and now from food, I'm writing about hard liquor for the latest book that I'm doing. So, which is again fascinating and a lot of learning along the way with it.
And by learning, you mean sampling. So that's great.
Yes, this is true. Sampling food, and now, yes.
There you go. Appropriate for the pandemic, I think.
Right.
So Zach, we're approaching 8 o'clock. I think we'll wrap it here. Do you have any last words for the group before we end the session?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This has been a lot of fun. So again, if you're interested in the book, this one is $22 is the list price. You can find it on, online retailers such as Amazon. You can find it on Barnes & Noble. You can find it on my publisher's website, which is the History Press. You can find it at your local libraries, hopefully, as well as you can check it out on my website, Backyard Road Trips, along with all that kind of good, fun stuff on there too. And again, thank you all, and thank you, Robert and Tewksbury, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also want to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library and the other 9 partnering libraries. Most importantly, I want to thank Zach and our audience tonight. Great turnout. And yeah, look for an email from me tomorrow with a link to the feedback survey, a link to the recording, and some information about some upcoming virtual programs on Boston history. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. Thanks again, Zach.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.